The air hung heavy and still as he stepped out into the oppressive July evening. St. Petersburg sweltered beneath a sky choked with a hazy orange glow. He pulled his worn hat low, seeking a sliver of shade against the relentless sun that refused to relinquish its grip on the horizon. Each breath was a struggle, the air thick and hot, heavy with the stench of the city. He yearned for a breeze, for anything to stir the suffocating stillness that pressed down upon him. His garret room, tucked away beneath the eaves of the building, had been a furnace, the heat reflecting off the cramped space and meager belongings. Just a tiny room, barely large enough to lie down in, his sanctuary, his prison. The air inside had been thick with the smell of sweat and desperation. He had spent the day pacing within its confines, his thoughts as chaotic and oppressive as the weather. His landlady, a stout woman with a sharp tongue and an even sharper eye, had been lurking in the hallway. He knew she was waiting for him, waiting to corner him about the rent. He owed her 2 months' worth. Her voice, shrill and unforgiving, echoed in his ears. He couldn't face her, not today. He hurried down the creaking stairs, his footsteps light and swift, hoping to slip past unnoticed. The last thing he needed was another confrontation, another reminder of his dire circumstances. He had mastered the art of invisibility within these walls, his presence shrinking with each debt he incurred. He was a shadow, a phantom, flitting through the corridors of his own life. Debt. It clung to him like a shroud, suffocating his dreams, his ambitions, his very will to exist. A web of unpaid bills, overdue notices, and whispered promises spun around him, trapping him in its intricate and inescapable grasp. He had borrowed from everyone, friends, family, even the ruthless moneylender who lurked in the city's underbelly. He hated himself for it, for his weakness, for his inability to provide for himself. The weight of his obligations pressed down on him, a physical burden that made it difficult to breathe. Each day he woke up with the crushing reality of his debts staring him in the face. It was a constant source of anxiety, a dark cloud that followed him wherever he went. He had tried desperately to find work. He had swallowed his pride, offering his services as a tutor, a translator, even a clerk. But St. Petersburg was overflowing with educated young men, all vying for the same meager opportunities. The competition was fierce, and he, burdened by his anxieties and lack of connections, found himself constantly passed over. He loathed this feeling of helplessness, of being trapped in a cycle of poverty he couldn't seem to break free from. He was a prisoner in his own life, the bars of his cell forged from the heavy chains of debt. He yearned for freedom, for a chance to breathe, to simply exist without the constant fear gnawing at his insides. Shame burned within him, a hot, searing ember that refused to be extinguished. Shame at his poverty, his inability to care for himself, to live up to the expectations that had been placed upon him. He was the son of a once respected family, his father a scholar, his mother from a lineage of artists. Now he walked the streets a pauper, his family name tarnished by his destitution. He could still remember a time when he had dared to dream, to envision a future filled with purpose and passion. He had excelled in his studies, his mind sharp, his thirst for knowledge insatiable. He had dreamed of becoming a writer, of filling pages with stories that would ignite the imaginations of others. But those dreams now felt like faded photographs, relics of a past life that seemed impossibly distant. Now, his days were consumed by a single, overwhelming question: how to survive. The shame of his situation was a heavy cloak, one he wore even beneath the scorching summer sun. It was in the way he avoided eye contact, the way he hunched his shoulders as if trying to disappear into himself. He felt like a fraud, a charlatan masquerading as a gentleman while his life crumbled around him. Every encounter with someone from his former life, every pitying glance, every whispered word cut him like a knife. He had become a ghost, haunting the fringes of his own existence. The streets of St. Petersburg, usually bustling with life, seemed to wilt under the oppressive July heat. The air throbbed with the rhythmic clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the shouts of street vendors hawking their wares. But even their usual vigor seemed muted, dulled by the relentless sun. The stench of the city, a pungent cocktail of sweat, sewage and decay, hung heavy in the air, amplified by the heat. It clung to the back of his throat, a constant reminder of the squalor that surrounded him. He watched as elegantly dressed ladies and gentlemen, their faces shielded by parasols and fans, hurried past, their noses wrinkled in distaste at the unpleasant odors. He envied them, their obliviousness, their ability to navigate the city without the weight of his despair clinging to them. They were actors in a grand play, their roles well defined, their futures assured. He, on the other hand, was a nameless extra, relegated to the sidelines, his lines forgotten, his purpose unknown. He crossed the bridge over the Fontanka Canal, pausing for a moment to gaze at the water. Even the canal, usually a source of respite from the city's clamor, seemed to shimmer and writhe under the oppressive heat. He longed to dive into its murky depths, to wash away the grime of the city and the despair that clung to him.